Greetings to people in this group and people that are watching it. I'm not an attorney. I do not practice law. Everything I give in here is for informational purposes only. I see many of you are starting to wake up, so I think I'm going to give y'all some more valuable information of what's going on in these courts, dealing with CPS, traffic tickets, and give you a few informations that you can use for a remedy when dealing with these corporations pretending to be government. These things can be applied, but again, remember, this is just for informational purposes only. Anything you do at your own risk. What I teach you is things I have had done, and the information I give you is things that are successful if applied right. So I'm going to start off with a simple traffic citation. Okay, you've got to know that they operate through the transportation code. And these policy enforcers, and that's exactly what they are, they're enforcing policy. They're all color of law. Anything color of law is not by the Constitution. However, if you don't know who you are and know your rights, you're bound to them because they presume you're a government employee. And usually that's done by, say, the Social Security number, the driver's license, and so forth. They've got a number on you to keep track of you. So when a policy enforcer pulls you over, the first thing most of the time, especially there in Ector County, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good sheriffs, especially sheriffs in Ector County, and I'm not going to mention names. They understand this, and they're just waiting to retire. So don't hate on them. They're just, like a lot of other people, indoctrinated. First thing they do is turn on them emergency lights. And if you'll look up in these codes, in these transportation codes, that's a felony. And the first thing you want to get on record is what is the emergency? Because remember, they're always recording now, or they're required to. And you can always record yourself as well. Now, he'll give you an excuse because, again, they're not taught this stuff. They're just taught how to extort you. You know, these corporations are bankrupt. They need to access our credit. We've got a $3.3 million tax write-off each year. And that's used to discharge all your debts, but that's a whole new a different story where all your bills are prepaid. Your electric, your phone bills, your house is already paid for, your cars are paid for, but that's into, again, a deeper discussion of knowing who you are as a man or a woman that God created, not a person, individual, and so forth. Defining yourself with a title, you diminished your standing. So when that officer pulls you over, he is basically already committed one felony, and he's probably not even aware of it. Everything's done by notices. So you may notice him as soon as he pulls you over and you ask him what's the emergency, and he tells you that there is not one. Inform him that, is he aware that he just committed a felony, you know? But I would recommend that when you go a little further up and understand more and more what's really going on. What they're needing you to do is get joinder, okay? So the states create this identity. It's an all caps name. And they charge it. It's basically, in courts, it's like a trust. It can be a person, a corporation, an individual. When has a man and a woman ever signed their name or put their name in the all caps name? Now, the obligated party to that is not the man or the woman, unless you get joinder. And when you get joinder, you went from the creditor as a man and a woman, and under Title 31, a man and a woman, we're our own creditors. And they are the debtors. And they use that in-between person, the all caps name, to be able to operate through commerce, because everything is commercial. If you're charged for any type of crime or whatever, citation, anything like that, everything's commercial. So that, in simple layman's terms, I'm going to call it the straw man. A lot of people don't believe in the straw man. Of course, I was one that didn't either until I started researching and being able to start discharging debts and beating these courts, which are actually banks at their own game. They want you, the first thing that officer does is he wants you to present an ID, okay? Well, presenting that ID is basically you admitting to being that person. And they usually will say something like, do you have an ID? You know, show me your ID. Your, keyword your. Well, that is not your ID. That driver's license is not yours. Look at the name on it. That is property of the state of Texas. That's not your property. You know, they've given you use of it, so don't claim it as being yours. You know, he who owns is the liable party. So why would you want to claim to own that driver's license? There's a few steps you can go do when they ask for it. You state, well, here's the state's property. Because keep in mind, it's recorded. And these courts know exactly what you're doing, and maybe the officer doesn't, but what you're doing is separating yourself. Well, here's the state's property. You know, I'm required to carry it on me at all times under duress. Things to that nature. You know, there's other ways to go about doing it without arguing. You see people on YouTube and they're arguing and not wanting to show ID, stuff like that. There's no need to that. Every citation is actually a summons to appear in the court, okay? Now that officer, as soon as he issues that citation, he has become a process server and cannot be a witness to the case. A process server cannot be a witness for that case. It's that simple. But as many of you know, they do it all the time, but again, you have to call them out on it. There is no charge that exists, period, until you, one, give a plea, or two, the prosecutor or clerk files an actual complaint, which is the original charging instrument. That's the actual charge, okay? And it's a commercial charge. They're not charging the man. Them courts don't have jurisdiction over a man. And they have 2 years to file one, or the case cannot proceed. Well, if the prosecutor, or the DA, or their county clerk files one, do they have first-hand knowledge of the facts? You know, or are they just basing it upon assumptions and presumptions? So everything that they do has to be rebutted by a sworn affirmation. You know, and a sworn affirmation to that is simply you stating that you do not know that prosecutor, never met him, you know, you don't know where he gets that information from, and then you can file it into the case. You've basically rebutted it. You will do something to the rebuttal of that's not your driver's license, that's not your property, the Social Security number is not your property, and on the back it clearly states it's property of the Social Security Administration. So these are things that they need, and they need jurisdiction. Resident, you know, they presume you're a resident of the United States. Well, the United States is a corporation, okay? You cannot reside in a corporation. A man cannot. We reside on the land of the Republic. But again, think of it this way. So everything they do is witchery. It's witchcraft. They're using spelling. Remember in school you were taught spelling? Spelling is putting spells by words. And what they've taught you in school is how to put spells and use spells. What you think that you are actually saying is not actually what you're saying, especially when you're writing and dealing with these courts. You know, they've taught you how to be a slave into the system since the 1950s when the education system was taken over. So some of the things that are very important is a rebuttal. Always rebut everything they say. And a sworn affirmation, because they live in the world of the dead. For instance, the judge tells you to all rise. What did they just do? They just rose your spirit from the dead. What's a summons? Think of the satanic ritual, a summons. Okay? They served you with a summons. That officer just served you with a summons. Well, they're practicing witchcraft on you, and they're dealing in Roman law, the same laws that were used to prosecute Jesus Christ. You know, you never want to go in there and you want to argue, period, because argument creates controversy. The courts need controversy. If you give them controversy, the courts end up with jurisdiction. Without controversy, the courts have no jurisdiction to move forward. That's why it's always important to try to settle a matter immediately. Never, ever, ever argue. And there's ways to settle the argument. When Jesus turned over the tables on them taxpayers, and of course these courts are nothing more but taxpayers. What did he basically was a metaphor. You turn the tables on them. Proof of claim. You offer a remedy upon verifiable proof of claim of their charges. Now that just made them the defendant. They want you to come in as a defendant, and they're hoping on your own stupidity. Usually you got state of Texas, Ector County, or city of Odessa coming after you. All right. Now, due process requires you to be able to face your accuser, does it not? So if Mr. or Miss State of Texas is the plaintiff in the matter, do you get that opportunity to face your accuser? No, you don't. And it's a game, it's a mind game, and I call it a mind fucker, excuse me of my language. It's so easy once you can start seeing through all the BS. So you have a right to face your accuser, and you want to face your accuser not to argue the matter, but to settle upon any verifiable proof of claim of the charges. Well, you can't face your accuser, and when you want to speak to that accuser, which is the plaintiff, the judge will always say, well, that prosecutor represents the state of Texas, okay? So now we're going to turn around and prove without controversy they have no subject matter. And you do that by you look at that prosecutor and you state, well, when's the last time you spoke to Mr. or Miss State of Texas? Well, they have not. It's impossible. Okay? Again, you're not arguing. You're there to settle the matter, upon verifiable proof of claim of the charges. And at this point, you've almost proven there's no subject matter in here. With no subject matter, the courts can't move forward. They're dead. They're in the water. And you look around and you state, well, has anybody in here spoke to Mr. or Miss State of Texas? Anybody. Ask it 3 times. Your remedy's in 3s. And when they don't, then you state, for the record, there's no plaintiff here and there's no subject matter in the case. Sometimes the judges will try to save this case even though they can't save it, and they're playing on your own stupidity. The judge will come say something like, well, we're going to order a new hearing for such and such date. And at that point, everything out of your mouth from that point on is there's no subject matter. When you take jurisdiction away from the courts, they cannot do nothing. They cannot move forward. They absolutely have no power without your consent to move forward. So when he tries to move it for another court date, he's basically testing you. And if you allow it, you've given him consent to move forward on it. Your only response from any time at that point, from the prosecutor saying something or the judge or anybody in that deal stating something, there's no subject matter here. And I know some people are dealing with CPS, so I'll cover a little bit about CPS. All right. CPS, again, is another private-owned corporation. They're required to follow the Constitution and follow due process. And these are federal guidelines that these CPS workers, in the states are supposed to follow, but however they don't, because you don't get due process dealing with the CPS. Everything they do is based upon assumptions and presumptions. And you will never find a man or a woman bringing a claim against you for a CPS case. It's always going to be State of Texas and Department of CPS, something to that effect. Again, those are your actual accusers. Everything else is a smoke screen. You will find an attorney will turn around and state in the writing they're doing it on the behalf of CPS. Okay? Well, basically, if you want in layman's terms, what that attorney or prosecutor is doing is reading its own mind, stating what its own belief is, and they're pretending like that it's coming from the agency. Well, an agency cannot speak. It cannot write. It cannot do nothing without a man or a woman. It's that prosecutor that's causing you harm. A building with a name on it cannot cause you harm. An entity cannot cause you harm. It's a man or a woman. So your focus needs to be off the department of CPS and so forth, unless you're just there to cross-examine your accuser, which you don't get that due process right. Everything they do in a CPS case needs to be rebutted point by point. That goes down to you being a U.S. citizen, your resident. You know, I reside in my body. That's where my resident is inside my body. I stand on the land of the republic. You've got democracy and you've got the republic. And the democracy has pretty well taken this country over because people lack of understanding of what's going on. I've seen people argue and say, well, we're not a democracy. Well, yes, there is a democracy here under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution. It allowed them to form a separate form of government, which was for corporations, and corporations have limited due process rights. So when you come in with a title such as a defendant, a plaintiff, or anything of that matter, an individual, you've diminished your standing, and you've got limited due process rights. You don't get the rights of a man or a woman, and so you believe that they're trespassing on your rights. Well, they're not actually trespassing on your rights when you lack the understanding of who you are and who God created you to be. They're doing as they believe is what is right. It's just a matter of your lack of standing of what's going on. Everything they do is assumptions and presumptions. Everything, because they live in the world of the dead and they cannot rebut a sworn affidavit. So if they say that you neglected your child or whatever, you're going to rebut that point by point. And when you're in that courtroom, what you got to understand is it's an act. You're a participant. Some of you that's been through court, look at your court documents. They're calling you an actor, a participant, a party to a suit, or things like that, They're giving you titles, Mr. or Miss. That's a title. To me, I'm just a man. I'm a man here to settle the matter today. Stay away from the titles and you'll get a lot more remedy. You'll get more of your rights back. They can't trespass. They can't even deal with a man or a woman without consent. And it goes back to the same thing. You have a right to face your accuser. They're doing complaints. A complaint is just nothing more than somebody bitching about something. You've got a claim. A claim is verified, and a claim is done by another man or a woman. It's a verified. It basically means, well, the evidence is there that you harmed this man or woman. And an honorable man or a woman would step up and they would try to remedy the matter, Okay, well, here's a verified claim. I harmed this man, this woman, or their property. Well, I better offer remedy, I don't want to be in court. As an honorable man, I'm there to settle before court ever happens. Be quick and settle with thy adversary. They're going to lock the keys and throw you in the dungeon. Scripture means so much more than these pastors are teaching you what it means. They're under a 50C3, which they can't educate you what you really need to be learning and what this Bible actually talks about. They're not allowed to, or they're going to lose their tax exempt status. And then, of course, child support. Child support's another deal, You and your baby's mama made them kids in private. Why the hell is it being brought into the public? Why are you paying a corporation to handle the matter? And that corporation does nothing but just keep sucking more and more and more money out of you and then throwing you in jail for a debt. They call it a contempt of court, but it's no more than that. They'll hit you and keep raising it to the point of you can't live. You cannot financially live, you know? And this is on both sides because I've dealt with men and women dealing with child support. People, if you ain't on child support and they coming after you and you want to be a man, and I'm not telling you not to take care of your property, you know, your sons and daughters. I'm telling you to handle your business in the private. Handle your business in the private, keep it out of the public. The public wants to come in and become a third party into your private matter. Two simple documents, man. That summons, since you don't have a contract and they're trying to get you for child support or trying to put child support on you, you void it out and read at a 45-degree void. No contract, offer decline, and you file it right back into the court, give your opposing counsel a copy, and you file a special appearance into that court. You know, again, this is for informational purposes only. Sometimes that summons is the contract offer, and you people miss that. The summons is the contract offer. If you do not have a contract with them already, that summons is a contract offer. You have 21 days to respond. Okay? There's your response for a child support. You know, if you ain't contracted with them. You void it out and read, file it back into the case, give the opposing party a copy of it, and you file a special appearance in there. That special appearance basically challenges the jurisdiction over personal jurisdiction. If they lose one leg of any form of jurisdiction, the whole case falls apart. Well, if you decline their offer to contract with them with that summons, they don't have a contract. So now they don't have a civil case. Then they don't have personal jurisdiction. You've knocked out two legs of jurisdiction they're required to get in there and beat the shit out of you and put you into that system. You know, you get in there, they're going to tell you you're required to do this and required to do that. No, you're not. Read the federal rules that these states are supposed to adopt. You know, they're supposed to mimic the federal guidelines. Child support's 100% voluntary. You know, the luxury of being in the private, you know, you don't have that to have to deal with the ex on the man or the woman, whoever has the kids, using control of the kids. Well, you can't see them for this or that reason. You know, the more you take the court's power away, the happier you both will be. You know, you can be a man and a woman and be able to remedy all sorts of controversy outside of the courtroom because there's no financial gain or benefit through the system. So I'll do some more covering on it, but I just thought that some of y'all really need to understand that everything's corporations, and corporations are what's actually coming after you. You will never, ever, ever find a statute, code, or a regulation that says a man or a woman. You will find persons. Define what a person is. It's an individual, you know. It's a corporation. It's even a trust. I'll give you a little more, and most of you probably ain't going to understand it. So that we'll use, and I'm going to go ahead and call them out in this. So you've got Webster in the Ector County District Court. What she basically does is she creates a Sedicate trust for each case. You know, if you're dealing in the district court, she appoints that judge to be trustee in the matter. Yeah. And the attorney is acting as the executor. And of course, how they do it, I don't know. Sometimes I've seen the roles switch where the judge is the executor and the attorney or the prosecutor is the trustee. What they've done is they've taken your status as a man where you're the beneficiary, and they are trying to be the beneficiary. Well, a beneficiary is not held liable. They want to be the beneficiary. Well, they charged that trust that had no value, and now there's a debt there. And that debt has unbalanced the books. Them books need to be balanced back to zero, and somebody needs to be liable. So I told you you're dealing in commercial commercial law. Well, if you're going in and taking the title as a defendant, they're assuming that you're the trustee and they are going to claim to be the beneficiary. And they always have to put a bond up, and that bond is always in your name. If they're bringing the suit, they're supposed to be putting up their own bond, but again, they're bankrupt. And they take out a bond in your name. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of it, but you need to understand them bonds are there to settle any debt. And if you don't claim them bonds, then that attorney or prosecutor is going to claim it as a gift. So, and yes, Carlos, a summons is a ritual, What do these, the cults do? The satanic cults, they're summoning spirits from the dead. And so when you receive that summons, they've just summons the spirit from the dead. When you go into court, they need that spirit to rise. That judge comes in and the bailiff says, all rise. They just raise the spirits from the dead to participate in their ritual. So you're dealing, and a good way to find out what court you're actually in is pay attention to the flags in that courtroom. You've got, most time you won't find yourself in a common law, which common law is the law of the land. You will find yourself in a maritime court, and you can easily detect that by the gold fringe flags in the courtroom. A lot of people miss them gold fringes on it, and they just assume that it's the American flag. And in fact, that's actually, without the gold fringe, the American flag, that is not the peacetime flag. That's a wartime flag. And we've been at war for years and years and years. Every man and woman's debts are prepaid. What's going on here is they're bankrupt, and they're trying to rob every man and woman because they need your tax exempt status. You just don't understand this, and it's something, if you're willing to, you can look into it and check it out. You have the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, where everything became a corporation. We don't have a actual government. We've got corporations. These corporations are controlling the world. That's why right now you're seeing all these corporations and so forth, like that MLB, the baseball league, they're now throwing a fit because their voting rights are being enacted in Florida. Well, they're upset because corporations have been controlling the world for at least the last 60, 70 years. And this is going to hurt them quite a bit. So keep that in mind, and watch all these corporations still trying to require the mask mandates when you go into the stores. They're usually the Fortune 500 companies are requiring their employees, such as Home Depot, stuff like that. They're Fortune 500 companies. They're behind all this too. They're behind controlling the people. These CEOs, they definitely know what's going on. It's been a secret for years. Anyways, I may cover some more on this and wake y'all up some more, but again, this is just informational purposes, and you people really need to wake up. And Land Murphy, generally you have 72 hours to respond back to anything that they send you, because if you do not respond, it becomes acquiescence. Acquiescence basically means they send you a notice of, and everything has to be a notice. Your electric bills, everything is a notice. And then if you don't pay it, then it becomes a, notice of a delinquent account. It may be shut off or whatever, So you got to turn around and you got to notice them back, or you have to rebut their presumptions within 72 hours. In a court case, it's usually 21 days. So keep that in mind. Always, what they don't teach you, and people get summoned all the time, it may be for a credit card debt. And again, if you're dealing with a credit card and being sued for a credit card debt, that prosecutor has no standing. They have no first-hand knowledge of the facts, or that attorney for that debt collection. In fact, what he's got is your private information. You need to file a identity theft on that attorney, because he's got your private information without your consent. He's never met Mr. or Miss State of State Bank or whatever bank it is coming after you. You know, they can't verify no debt that's true post due and owed to Mr. or Miss State of Bank, because they don't exist. It's all, you got to see through the smoke screen, people. Everything they do has a title to it. Everything. If there's no plaintiff there and that prosecution has no standing, there's no case. If that attorney has no standing there, there's no case. You can challenge jurisdiction of the courts at any time, you know. And I'm going to tell you right now, Ector County is really bad about making frivolous complaints and locking people up. I can't tell you how many people that are locked up for these frivolous complaints and debt charges. And everybody in locked up right now is in there for a debt. Well, I thought a debt was against the Constitution. Well, it is, but you got to understand, these are not American courts. See, every one of these public officials gave up their right as an American when they took that oath. These courts are foreign. So, I'll put my head together, and I may come to this group and give y'all a little more information on this and so forth, but there's a lot of information that will be mind-boggling to y'all. What I want to do is just kind of give you a little information, something for you to think on, you know. Little things like, can you face your accuser? That's your due process right. If you can't face your accuser, then your due process was violated. And if they move forward, even if you had a court hearing and they still move forward without subject matter or standing in the case, you don't have to go run and file they want you to appeal it. Well, the appellate courts are all the same. They all work together. But what you can do is look up what a de novo is. File a writ of de novo into your case. Yeah, Carlos, Trinzi versus Pagliaro, statements of counsel in brief and argument is insufficient for a summary judgment, which means that prosecutor or that attorney has no first-hand knowledge of the facts. He cannot file anything to the case. He cannot speak into the case unless he gets up there and swears in, which he will not do under pains of penalty or penalties of perjury. He will not do, because he does not have first-hand knowledge of the facts. Therefore, it all must be stricken from the record. But if you allow it to be slid and not say a thing about it, you know, they're going to presume that they have the standing to do so. So, y'all check out Trinzi versus Pagliaro, because it's never been overturned, and I personally don't like using the cases. If I do, in my writings, I will put brackets around it. It's there, but it's not. It's called the Four Corners Rule. Four corners means anything inside of the bracket the four corners does not apply to the rest of it. And one other thing you need to understand on them summons for, like, say, a traffic ticket, they need you to appear into their jurisdiction. Well, again, this is for informational purposes only. It's a contract offer. Mark out that promise to appear and decline it. You know, always reserve all your rights and don't sign on the X. The X is for the dead. You're going to put by and then put your